And greetings once again to all of you blood bugs and behemoths of the Commonwealth. We are here today to take a look at some of the new features introduced with ENB 0.291 for Fallout 4. And these include a comprehensive set of controls that allow you to control many aspects of the appearance of the sky. We will also be looking at the time of day controls, which work in tandem with the sky controls and a few of the other effects, as well as interior and exterior separations for some effects. First, let's take a look at ENB's sky controls, which allow you to adjust the appearance of the sky in ways similar to those found in the official modding tools for games like Fallout and Skyrim. As always, we're going to open our ENB menu in-game with Shift-Enter, and today we are not looking at the shader parameters or the ENB series panels, so I will close these to make more room for our ENB series.ini panel. And here you can see a time of day section, though in general you will want to leave the values here alone. Do not touch. And down at the bottom we have our sky section, which we will look at closely in a moment, and up here in the statistics area we can see some information about time of day as understood by ENB. Each line beginning with TOD indicates what percentage of ENB's effects are derived from each specified time segment. So in this scene, the effects are governed 22% by the sunrise settings and 78% by the day settings. Okay, so let's take a look at the sky settings. And here, as I scroll down, you'll see that there is a wealth of parameters available to allow you to customize the appearance of the sky. Now the good news is that many of these are essentially repeating parameters that just apply to different parts of the sky. So for example, we will have the same set of parameters for controlling the sky for each specified time segment, being dawn, sunrise, day, sunset, dusk, and night, as well as for interiors, which we will discuss a little later in the video. So once you understand each of the parameters conceptually, it's fairly easy to understand how they each apply to different aspects of the image. And in this video, we will go through each type of parameter briefly, just to give you a quick sense of how each of these works. Okay, so getting started, first I have waited until 12 noon in game time so that the TOD factor is 1.0 for daytime. This means any changes that I make to daytime settings will be fully reflected here and will not be influenced by any other time of day settings. And I have also slowed the time of the game to real time in the interest of preserving these conditions for as long as possible. So looking at the first set of parameters here, we have gradient intensity, and I will be looking at gradient intensity day. This basically controls how much light is emitted by the entire sky during the daytime. And note that if I change the same parameter for a different time of day, the image is unaffected because the current game image is being governed 100% by the daytime settings. So as I raise this to 2, you'll see the sky becomes much brighter and lighter. So now if we try a lower intensity, we see the color of the sky becomes a bit darker and less luminous. Alright, resetting to default values. Let's take a look at gradient desaturation. The default value here is 0, so full saturation. And as we increase this value, we remove color from the sky, approaching a more black and white color palette. And with this enable checkmark here, we can easily toggle on and off just ENB's sky effects for a simple comparison. Okay, back to default values again. The next parameter we'll look at is gradient top intensity. And this works the same way as the gradient intensity parameter we looked at earlier. However, this affects only the top portion of the sky. So, as I raise this value, you'll see that the top portion of the sky becomes much brighter, so that you can easily configure the appearance of this portion of the sky without affecting the others. And now we will look at gradient top curve. And to understand curves, let's quickly jump into Photoshop. Here I have a screenshot from the game, and we are going to want to look at our curves menu. So I will hit F twice to go into full screen mode, and then Control M to open the curves panel. And here you can see as I shift this line up and to the left from the center point, this is similar to reducing the curve value in ENB. And conversely, moving the line down and to the right from the center point is similar to increasing the curve value in ENB. And basically, as you increase the curve, this produces higher contrast and color saturation with fewer midtones. And reducing the curve produces a lower contrast image with more midtones. Now the curve parameters in ENB do not affect the entire game image, but instead are specific to certain parameters. For example here, the top gradient of the sky. So it behaves a little bit differently. You'll notice that as I increase the top curve value, the color of this area of the sky appears darker, though we appear to lose some color saturation. While on the other hand, if we reduce the value, you'll notice that this area of the sky appears much brighter, while color saturation is preserved or perhaps even increased. Finding a good look and feel is achieved by carefully balancing the intensity and curve parameters for each section of the sky until you achieve your desired results. And generally, you're going to want to change the values by fairly small increments, like decimal values, to achieve more practical and usable results. Alright, and the next parameter we'll be taking a look at is the gradient color filter, which, like all the other parameters, is available for each time of day segment and for each component of the sky. If we expand this parameter, we can see red, green, and blue controls that allow us to control the color filter used for the top portion of the sky. So here, where I have a red value of 255, green at 225, and blue at 100, this produces a bright orange filter, which saps the sky of much of its blue tone. Or conversely, we can try giving the sky a true blue color by removing all red and green components, though that doesn't feel quite natural either. But in any case, you get the picture. So now, as we move down the list, we start to see repeats of settings that we saw earlier, but now just for a different portion of the sky. So instead of gradient top intensity day, we are now looking at gradient middle intensity day. Again, our intensity works the same way as before, and let me just show you what ENB refers to as the middle portion of the sky. And you'll notice that these sections blend into each other, so there's an overlap between middle and top, and as you configure the sky, you'll want to carefully balance these. And here I will apply a green color to the middle section just so it stands out visually, and I will go with a pure green so that you can clearly see where the middle section of the sky is located and how it blends into the top area and into the horizon area, which we will look at next. Again, the same set of controls here. So intensity increases the brightness and amount of light, whereas the curve adjusts the behavior of the gradient. And here I will set the horizon to bright red, again so that you can clearly see this portion of the sky. And here you can clearly see the separation of the horizon, middle, and top components in red, green, and blue. Not really a pretty picture, though with a more subtle touch, you can use these tools to do things like add a little flair to a sunrise scene, for example. I encourage you to explore and see what kind of interesting combinations you can come up with. Alright, so we've covered the sky itself, but now we have to look at the things that are in the sky, such as the clouds. Fortunately, we are looking at a similar set of tools here, meaning that for each time of day, our clouds have parameters for intensity, curve, desaturation, and hey, we have a new one, opacity, or transparency. So intensity will make our clouds brighter, the curve adjusts the brightness and saturation characteristics of the color palette, and we can have some fun with our color filter to give ourselves some pink fluffy clouds, or some deep salmon sunset looking clouds, or just the Pepto-Bismol pink. Or why don't we try some radioactive green clouds? Because it's Fallout, right? We do have cloud desaturation controls, though these seem to have less impact here than they do for the sky. And then we have our new setting, opacity. So here, by reducing the opacity to 50, we make the clouds 50% transparent. And we can go down to 25, or if we want, by setting this to 0, we can completely remove clouds from the sky and have a nice clear day. This can be useful when you're trying to configure the colors of a sky gradient without the interference of clouds. Alright, and the last set of daytime settings we'll be looking at are parameters for the sun. Again, we have some familiar settings, such as intensity and desaturation. Unfortunately, we cannot turn off the sun by reducing its intensity. We can just reduce the glow a bit, though we certainly can increase it if desired. So if we want our sun at noon to be super bright, we can just boost it here. And those of you familiar with ENB's radial lens flare effect will notice that increasing the intensity of the sun directly increases the intensity of this effect when looking at the sun. Now in the color filter area, we can have some fun. giving ourselves a purple sun, or a pink sun, or a red sun, or a blue sun, or teal, or whatever. I like to go for a orange sort of color here to give the sun a nice warm glow, which again is also reflected in the radial lens flare effect. Alright folks, so we've taken a look at all of the daytime settings for the sky. But what happens when night falls? Well, actually, it's not too much. You just have a few more parameters to configure. So let's go ahead and take a look. So now I've changed the time of day to midnight so that I can configure some nighttime settings. And to get started, all of the sky parameters we looked at during daytime also apply here. Now I'll go ahead and recommend a few simple adjustments to make for the night settings that can easily help you achieve darker, more realistic looking nights. And first, we're going to look at gradient top curve night, and we'll set this to a value of 1.5. This will give the top section of the sky a deep, rich, dark appearance. Now moving down in the menu, we will take a look at gradient middle curve night. And here we will adjust this to 1.35. And you can see how this darkens the middle section of the sky in the distance, blending in with the darker top section. And I'm actually going to drop this to 1.3 here. And moving down to the horizon. And finally, we'll take a look at gradient horizon curve night, and this I will set to 1.2. And now, with these three simple settings, we have a much darker and more realistic appearance for the night sky, which really helps to make stars and other lighting appear much more dramatic. Like over here at the Abernathy farm. And I will toggle on and off the ENB sky settings for a simple comparison. It's really quite remarkable how bright the sky actually is at night in the original game. And I feel these simple adjustments really help a lot. Now some of you may prefer to extend the darkness of the sky all the way down into the horizon. However, ENB for Fallout 4 does not yet contain controls to manage the color and intensity of the mist, or the distant fog. And as such, if you darken the horizon too much, you end up with an unnatural looking contrast right at the horizon. Once fog and mist controls have been added to ENB for Fallout 4, you'll have even greater flexibility with managing the overall appearance of nighttime scenes. For now, we just have to work with the mist and fog settings that come with the game. So again, I recommend a value of somewhere around 1.2 for gradient horizon curve night, though you can probably go a little higher if you like. And let's take a quick look at our nighttime handiwork here. And again, a simple on-off comparison. Now moving along, we also have parameters to control a couple of the elements found in the night sky, starting with the moon. And again, here we have some familiar parameters, including intensity and desaturation. And perhaps most fun, of course, is the color filters. Blue moon. Do 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 do. Or how about a blood moon? Or we can go ahead and make the moon yellow, since it is in fact, as we all know, made out of cheese. And let's take a look at our cheese wheel in the sky. But why stick with reality? With the tools ENB offers, it is no problem to create surreal and alien-looking skyscapes, with purple skies and turquoise clouds, and a green moon and whatever tickles your pickle. And before we move on, let's take a quick look at a time-lapse of some of the possibilities here. Alright, I know this has been a long video, but there's still some more ENB goodness to learn, so you may want to stick around. Now, in addition to being used for managing the appearance of the sky over time, ENB's time of day settings can also be used to control the behavior of some other effects over time, such as bloom and lens effects. So here, you'll see as I pump up the bloom amount night value to 1, this is clearly reflected in the nighttime scene, with the intense soft glow shown here. And in addition to bloom, we can also adjust the lens amount night parameter to adjust the intensity of lens effects at night. And here I'm using the optional radial lens flare effect. I love how this lens flare looks different depending on the color of the light source. I think that's pretty neat. Aside from being able to control settings based on time of day, ENB also allows for separate control of some settings based on whether you are in an interior. So near the top of the statistics panel, we can see interior factor. When interior factor displays a value of 1.0, this means that interior settings will be used. And please note, while the panel displays separate settings for interior day and interior night, at present all interiors are only affected by the day settings. The night settings are currently not active, though hopefully this will change in the future. So ultimately, ENB offers quite a number of different ways to automatically control the appearance of some of its effects, based on factors like time of day and whether the character is indoors or outdoors. And I find that to be an impressive amount of flexibility. One other quick note, you may notice that each of these sections has a line called Ignore Weather System, which is enabled. This is because ENB for Fallout 4 does not yet have a weather system implemented. However, once this is in place, not only will you be able to set up separate settings for different times of day and interiors versus exteriors, but separate settings can also be used for every different weather type in the game, and you can really go down the rabbit hole. And hopefully we'll see something similar down the road for Fallout 4. Alright folks, I know this was a long video, but I'm sure you'll agree there was a lot to cover, and I hope you now feel comfortable diving in and exploring ENB's sky and time of day tools, and coming up with your own visual creations. As always, I want to thank you for joining me. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, and be sure to stay tuned for more updates about ENB and other visual and performance mods for Fallout 4. Catch you next time.